Good afternoon and welcome to A Mighty Blaze and Debut Spotlight. I'm your host today, Ellen Comisar, and I'm delighted to be here today to speak to Megan A. Schikora, whose new book, A Woman in Pink, came out on Tuesday. And as you can see, it's very pink. And we did not coordinate this, but I did say, Jay, I might as well pick a pink shirt.
That's right.
So we're all in pink today, and we're delighted to be so, to welcome Megan to our show. A little bit of background before we get started, Megan. For those of you who are longtime Blazers, welcome back. We are always delighted to see you. And please start thinking up your questions and putting them in our chat. We will get to them later. For those of you who are new to the Blaze, thank you for joining us. We hope you'll enjoy what you see today and come back frequently. The Blaze was established in March 2020. We are almost 6 years old. We started at the age of COVID when authors had their book tours abruptly canceled. And Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, two very generous and creative authors themselves, realized that there was an opportunity to help authors who were devastated not to go on tour. And on a shoestring and with just an idea in mind, they came up with the Blaze. We are now going strong. We're an organization of about 30 professional creatives, all with writing backgrounds. And when I say professional, I mean we've done it in our lives in some capacity, but we are all volunteer on the Blaze. And we are committed to bringing authors into your living room and to make sure that you are getting out and buying books that you might not otherwise be hearing of. We have big name authors, we have brand new authors, as we do on Debut. And we are here all the time. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and on Twitter, which we refuse to call X, in part because they kicked off a Mighty Blaze and we don't know why. You can still search for our tweets, just search for Mighty Blaze and you will get our tweets and know about all our upcoming shows. And of course, we have a newsletter. www.amightyblaze.com is where you can sign up and you'll get information on all of our shows. And that will drop into your email inbox every other week, and you'll get a full roster of what's coming. And today, what's coming is A Woman in Pink with Megan A. Schikora. So welcome, Megan.
Hi, Ellen. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are delighted. We are delighted. Let me just, now that I've given the plug for us, I'm going to give the plug for you and your book. Your book has been praised broadly for its sharp and honest writing. It has been called dazzling, relatable, haunting, with gut-wrenchingly real characters, elegant, concise. Here's the one I like, a thrilling tale of obsessive love with blisteringly good dialogue. It is sometimes bitter, sometimes raw, always revealing and vulnerable. And that's why I loved it so much. So, and now a little bit about Megan, and then we'll get right into the book, I promise. Megan A. Schikora has worked in mental health and has taught writing for many years, all while trying to squeeze her writing into the margins of her day. In 2019, she decided she would focus on her creative projects and committed to doing so, and the outcome is this beautiful book. She has had short stories and personal essays published in many places, most recently Exacting Clam, Midway Journal, Change 7, Hidden Peak Press, and Friction, whose 2022 short story contest she won with a story called Sticks and Stones. Her novel, A Woman in Pink, was a Writing Award shortlist choice for the Page Turner Awards. Megan lives in Michigan with her daughter, and the Mighty Blaze is delighted to have her with us today. So welcome, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So this is Pub Week for you.
This is Pub Week for me.
How have you celebrated and what's it been like?
It has been so strange to think about something and work for something and plan for something for several years now and to finally be in it. It's just,
Right.
I feel almost a bit detached and a little bit dazed, to be honest with you. So it's been really exciting. I went out with my girlfriends on Tuesday night on pub night. That was great. And I just am doing many things to promote the book, but also trying to be present and just remember what's happening right now, because down the road, I'll be so glad that I did that.
I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure. So you celebrated with girlfriends, which I think is quite appropriate,
Yes.
given that our protagonist, who doesn't have a name, and we'll talk about that as well, that our protagonist has two very close girlfriends with whom she shares humor, goes out with, confides in, keeps secrets from, all of the above. And so, why don't you tell us just very briefly what the story of A Woman in Pink is about, and then what is the role these girlfriends play in the book?
Okay. So the book is essentially a woman meeting a man and deciding that he is her Johnny Cash and she is his June Carter, and theirs is a great love story. And this is the story that she is telling herself when they meet. But the story that unfolds as the book progresses is different than that. And her girlfriends, two in particular, Fiona and Claire, are really important to this story. Female friendships in general are very important to this story. They are her sisters, for better or worse. They're together a lot. They have a great time together, but they also check her when she needs to be checked, and they're touchstones and they're essential to her. I'm a big fan of female friendships. My own are extremely important to me, and I wanted to make sure that that was a central part of the book. She needs these people. They are her board of directors.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because she talks about her aunts and her mother's siblings, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that was a sort of a different kind of friendship, but those women also sort of were the take charge, we're going to do things, step
Yes.
in when necessary. Whereas Claire and Fiona, there's a lot of talk, but they kind of let our protagonist head her own direction, or maybe the protagonist is just not listening. I'm not sure.
That's right. That's right. That line moves, I think, throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
There are times when I think Claire and Fiona feel compelled to step in and say what's on their mind, and other times when they don't, when everyone steps back and lets everyone else do what they're going to probably do anyway. I think that's a very realistic aspect of adult friendships. And so I tried to make these friendships as authentic as possible. And they feel real to me.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think, it's sort of that question, is this the train you want to stand in front of? Are you really going to jump in front of that and, put your friendship and your own safety at risk by speaking the hard truths to somebody you really care about? And when do you step in, and when do you say, I'm just going to step away and let this thing run its course? And
That's
I think, and you see that I mean, you're seeing everything through the protagonist's eyes, but you also get a very real sense of how Fiona and Claire are interacting with her over the course of a very long friendship. I mean, the book covers, broadly speaking, a 15-year time period, though we jump back and forth and we're not always looking at it from, it's not a sequential telling of a story. You mentioned June and Johnny Cash.
yes.
June Carter and Johnny Cash. And the movie Walk the Line
Yeah.
comes in to play and into the narrative a number of times. The male love interest, Dutch, his mother is actually named June. Was his
Yeah.
father named Johnny as well? Was that
Yes.
part of it?
Yeah.
So you have these dual references, Dutch's parents, as well as the movie Walk the Line and the actual musicians, June Carter and Johnny Cash. And there's some publicity material that I saw that says, you were inspired by that movie.
Yes.
How so?
Well, I have a lifelong fascination with Johnny Cash and June Carter, starting when I was in high school. And at that time, that's when I became aware of Johnny Cash and June
Sure.
Carter. And not long after that, she passed away, and he passed away shortly thereafter. I think it was only 3 or 6 months after. And in that very short time between their deaths, his song, which is a Nine Inch Nails cover called Hurt, that song came out, which was the most, if I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
Not
the most gutting, beautiful, sorrowful cover. It's a beautiful song. And then he died. And so I remember, for me, the entire narrative around Johnny Cash and June Carter was that they couldn't live without each other. And
hmm
he died because he couldn't be here without
right.
her. And I really, I don't know, that just moved me, and I have sort of carried that with me all along the way. And then when the movie came out, I really I really love that movie.
It's
But
a great film.
at the same time that I love that story and I love that movie, I have a lot of questions, my own, and questions that I'm raising in the book about the differences between the stories we tell ourselves about relationships and the relationships as they actually are. And so, in my thinking about Johnny Cash and June Carter and writing that parallel into the book, I didn't know them, of course. And I can never know what their real life relationship was like. I
Right.
only know what I hear in pop culture, what I see in that beautiful movie, maybe articles I read in Rolling Stone, the Nine Inch Nails cover of Hurt. I don't
hmm
know those real people. And I think that gap between what I know and what I think I know and what I wish were true, those gaps are, to me, are interesting.
And I think that does reflect back on this idea of what we tell ourselves is true and what is actually true. And we
Yeah.
see that a lot because our unnamed protagonist falls hard for this guy Dutch.
Yeah.
And there are warning signs from the get-go that this is not necessarily going to work out well, in part because he drinks a lot. He's an alcoholic. He's has no memory of things he says or does at different times, um, through drugs,
Yeah.
and alcohol and other drugs, I should say.
Yeah.
Um, and she starts to a degree confusing, she tells herself a lot of lies. It's not just that she's telling her girlfriends, these fantastical stories about, this great relationship she's having. There's a whole sense of whether she's kind of losing it. She's so obsessed with this man.
Yeah.
And, most women who I think will relate to this book, in part because we've all had that romance that was like either the romance with the bad boy or the guy who your friends were like, what are you thinking?
Right.
And I think that's what makes this book so relatable. You also worked in the mental health field. Were you seeing this kind of, did you focus on addiction and obsession with your clients? But you do
Well,
a really good job, I think, of examining sort of and on showing us the lie, which is very much what a gentle therapist would do, when working with clients.
yeah. Well, when I was working in mental health, I saw right away that field overlaps so much with addiction and recovery, substance abuse. And so I'm definitely bringing that part of my professional experience into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have a lot of personal experience loving someone wrestling with active addiction. And
Okay.
I think that is front and center in this book. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm bringing that to the table.
All right. We had, by the way, one of our guests last year was Lauren McQuiston, who
Okay.
wrote a debut memoir, which is a fabulous book. And I encourage anybody who is on the debut spotlight and Blaze Nation who has not gone back and listened to that interview or taken a look at that book. It's called The Lost Causes Club.
Oh,
She was a woman who was very talented musician, still is a very talented, but who was a blackout alcoholic from a very young age and
oh,
wrote what is both a memoir, but also sort of she didn't call it a self-help book because she didn't see herself as an expert. And yet she said, this is what worked for me. And these are some of the ways. And it was actually an interesting book in that it's, while it's perhaps people who are suffering from addiction and addictive personalities will get a lot from it. It also is very interesting to sort of get inside the head of somebody who's suffering and understand what that process is, and what you, as somebody who's outside that process but adjacent to it, can or can't do. And so it was interesting that I'm not sure if this book appealed to me in part because that book appealed to me, but she also has a pink cover. She's got a big heart on her cover.
Oh, really? Oh,
so if you're just joining us, we're talking not to Lauren McQuiston today, but to Megan A. Schikora, whose book, A Woman in Pink, is a fictional account of a couple where addictive behaviors are central both to the individual couple, as couples' lives, both partners, as well as to, in a degree, defining this relationship, because our protagonist clearly is a bit addicted to Dutch.
Yes.
If you can, I'd love you to talk a little bit about Dutch, because he's, I guess, charismatic, but I could never quite grasp what it was about him that had such a magnetic effect on her.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I wasn't supposed to.
Well, certainly to her, he has great charisma. And also, I think that he has these broken places, and she has her own. And there's a line in the book about some people's broken places correspond. They line up in a way that there's almost like a restorative quality in their connection.
Mm-hmm.
And she feels that with him, I think in part because she has a really difficult history around self-image and body dysmorphia and, struggles with eating disorders and all this kind of thing. So I think when she meets him and they're reflecting each other back to each other, he's showing her, so he's holding up a mirror and showing her someone beautiful. And I don't think that she had ever felt that way before. And that's very, very powerful for her because of how it ties into all of her brokenness. And so, yes, he has a very strong hold for sure.
That's true. She feels she's never really heard that from other people, and including her family. And
there's also this quality that he has. And I know how young this sounds. It sounds very young. It sounds like maybe 20-something young, maybe not something that should or would endure into people's 30s and 40s, which it does with them. But there's something with him too, where he's the one everyone wants, and the one everyone wants her.
Right.
And that's also very powerful to her.
Sure.
They hold her in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And one of the other things we talk about, that the book talks about and addresses, though it's not central, but I think it may be significant, is sort of these families of origin, because both our protagonist and Dutch have had complicated relationships with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
In Dutch's case, his father is an absent figure. We see a relationship primarily with the protagonist and her mother, and then some of her aunts. But these aren't easy relationships, and but there's not. And I'm wondering about this. I hadn't really thought about it until we're talking. This sense of to what degree those primary relationships influence or have an effect on the addictive personalities these adults have, the offspring in these families.
Sure. I think that the protagonist comes from a pretty old school background. I mean, this pretty traditional Irish Catholic family
Right.
where whatever you do, uh, please get married. Please get married and have kids. Whatever
Start those
else you do
babies.
or don't do, get the babies. Yeah. So she's coming from that, and her parents love her very much, and that is like their primary goal for her. And so, she's bringing that pressure, those expectations. She carries that, and that becomes more pronounced as she ages, as it
And
does.
as her friends have babies and she
Yeah,
finds herself at parties with lots of kids running underfoot.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And at one point, she's at a friend's wedding, and of course, the expectation is that now this lovely wedding has happened, and the babies will be coming for her friend and her friend's new spouse. And the protagonist's own parents are at the wedding as well, and the pressure, she talks about it with Claire at the wedding reception. The pressure has just increased tenfold because it's right in front of them and it's happening for these people around them, but it's not happening for her. And so that's a powerful force.
But it's also not, I mean, it's not clear, does she really, what does she want? And I think she's struggling with that because on the one hand, yes, she's seeing it all around her. But I think we all have friends who see it all around them and say, not for me, but
Right.
for whatever reason, either isn't admitting it completely to herself, but certainly isn't admitting it to her parents to say, this isn't in the cards, or I don't think this is going to happen. Even though, she's in a loving sexual relationship with a guy, and it's not always clear that they're being all that careful. So it's sort of an interesting dynamic. There is almost a juvenile aspect to her maturity that
Yes.
she's not able to say, no, I'm not doing that, and thank you anyway.
Yes.
Back off. She never has that conversation with her parents.
No, she doesn't. I think all she really says is no promises. I think
Right.
she in fact says that specifically. But she does have I would almost and I love my protagonist, and
She's
I
great.
she's my little sister, but also she does have a very stunted quality.
Yeah.
Even as she ages chronologically, she doesn't really seem to emotionally. And she has a very hard time articulating or even understanding herself what it is that she wants and where it is that she wants to go. And all she really knows for sure is that she wants Dutch. And so she really commits to this story of her and Dutch. But at the same time, he's coming from his own background, and his father's absence is stamped on him in such a vacuous way. It really was a huge part of what shapes him. And so men without fathers, boys without fathers. Um,
Without role models. His core group is the guys at the bar.
that's right.
And
And his mother is doing June. I love June also.
she's a
June,
great character.
yeah, she's doing everything she can, or everything she thinks she can possibly do, to balance this scale weighted against a fatherless boy, to give him every possible privilege, every possible opportunity to do the job of two parents, to show up at every game and be the loudest one cheering. And many single parents do what June does.
Yeah.
And she tries so hard, and still he is broken.
He is. I think that's interesting because one of the next thing on my list that I was thinking of talking about was this concept of privilege,
Yeah.
because we find out midway through the book that we know that there's money in Dutch's background, and then we find out just sort of how much. His mother hands him a very large check.
Yeah.
The question is, what are you going to do with that money? And Dutch isn't always about making the right choices. But you also have the protagonist talking about her eating disorder, which is in the past for the most part, though she still is self-conscious about eating in public. She's very certain that people are watching her and judging her based on what she is eating at a
Yes.
table, when in fact nobody's really looking.
Yeah,
But she talks about the privilege of being able to have an eating disorder.
sure.
And he is certainly privileged financially, and that serves to a degree his need for abuse of drugs and alcohol. Can you talk a little bit about the privilege, how privilege plays into the roles of these characters and into their addictive personalities?
Sure. I think that that is another one of those things they recognize in each other. I
Mm-hmm.
think they recognize the complementary brokenness in each other, and I think they recognize some level of privilege. And she even says at one point after he, discloses some things to her, she says, "Oh, it's you." That she keeps repeating that, and it's that recognition of a person. Oh, it's you, and I have that in me as well. So with her eating issues, it's a real source of shame,
Right.
because what is grosser than to have such abundance that you're free to turn it away, to
Mm-hmm.
know that you're so secure in your access to food and whatever it is that you need to your needs, to
Right.
know that you're so secure that you are free to push a plate away. Imagine, and she imagine what people who are hungry would say and think if they saw her doing this. Imagine just the outrage that would cause, and rightfully so. And at the same time, Dutch, with this voracious appetite for drugs and alcohol and anything he can find really to escape his demons,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing worse you can give a person struggling with that than tons of money. And that's what he has. That's
Which
what
is
he has.
interesting because you would think his mother, I mean, his mother's a judge, they're smart people, they're educated people,
Yeah.
and either he's been able to completely buffalo his mother, she's lost in this, or she's just oblivious to the reality that handing him a large check and saying, go at it, here's your money, is
Yeah.
really going to be devastating for his ability to get out from under, as
Right.
opposed to make it possible.
Right, right, absolutely. And as smart as she is and as accomplished as she, I think, is in a lot of denial. She's in a
Yeah.
lot of denial. And under all of her success and her polish and her good intentions, she's vulnerable too. And what she wants the most is for her kid to be okay. And
Right.
her greatest fear is that her kid is not okay. And so at this point, fairly early on in the book, she decides, well, maybe if I put this enormous opportunity in front of my kid, maybe this is what makes it okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, we also do see that Dutch, in sort of this continuing theme of, he's revealing himself. He reveals a big dark secret about his background, which is very telling and painful, and that he's still, in many ways, trying to move beyond different degrees of success. But you get this sense that he too is lying to himself. He too is like looking at the pretty house on the street and saying, when if you'll have me, that's where we'll live. And so he's feeding into that fantasy
Yeah,
that the protagonist has. And I don't think he's doing it maliciously. I think there's a part of him that is, hugely in love and sees the protagonist as this beautiful woman who is in his life and who he's, you know, he's impressed that he goes into her home and there's music and she's reading and there's books and, all these things about her that are different from his life, and
Yeah.
that he sees that fit.
But although
Clearly, go
go ahead.
ahead. No,
Well, I
you.
do think, he participates in this love story.
Oh,
Absolutely.
sure.
But he also has a freedom that she doesn't. He can enter and exit that story at will when it serves him, or when it feels good, or when it's convenient, or when the timing is, suits him.
Right.
He can step in, but when he's ready, he can step out. And she can't. She lives there. She lives there.
And she doesn't really understand why or when, or, she blames herself. Well, he stepped out. What did I do? But she's constantly hopeful after each time he does it. And this happens repeatedly.
Yeah.
That obsessiveness is driving her to say, well, he's going to come back. And you see this over a long period of time, despite the fact that there are many signs he is not coming back, except then he sort of does, and then he sort of doesn't. And, so you have that back and forth, and she's just such a willing partner to this broken story.
She is, and she really frustrates people, turns out. It's so interesting to finally be hearing from some people. She's very frustrating. Even as she ages, some of the feedback I've gotten is, why isn't she making different decisions? Why doesn't the trajectory change?
Right.
But yeah, she is.
Well, we also, at some point when it becomes clear for a period that Dutch is not going to be the guy, despite her dream, and he's never gone from her head. He's the one who got away, or the one who might have gotten away, but I'm not going to let him get away. She meets this guy, Tim, through friends, and she's set up, and Tim is living in his own little fantasy bubble.
Yes.
Describe, for people who have yet to have a chance to read this beautiful book, A Woman in Pink, describe for our viewers what Tim's fantasy world looks like, in particular his house.
Yeah. So the protagonist meets Tim, and she does end up dating him for a while. And he is, by all accounts, very devoted to her, and also universally regarded as a great guy over and over
He's
again.
the nice guy.
He's such a great guy. Yeah. And I had
Maybe
trouble.
a little dull.
I would say, yes. And he is a guy who very much wants the house. He already has the house. It's just him in it, but he bought the house for his wife, for his kids, for this family that he's ready to create. Imagining and actively seeking out and actively projecting onto the protagonist. And I had trouble writing him because I wasn't sure when I was writing it if he ever actually saw her, or if she was just part of the script for him.
Right.
I still am not sure if he ever actually saw her. And so I have heard rave reviews about him too. And
really,
yes. And why don't, the protagonist and Tim should be front and center. And I am not sold on that either.
I'm shaking my head, people.
No, I mean,
no.
yeah. And
he's sort of like, there's this idea, and I think it's probably largely true in that it's existed for a long time, is that many men get to a certain age where they say, I've got a degree of success. I see where my career is going. I have a little money in the bank. I've had some fun in my early 20s, and I'm now ready to settle down and find somebody. And it's like the next person they date is the one that they end up with, because they've got it all mapped out.
yes.
And so he's sort of waiting for that woman who's going to step in and be the parent to the future kids who are going to ride the bicycles he already has in the garage.
Hanging on the garage wall
You know,
already. The whole family of bikes on the wall in the
that was
garage.
crazy. But he's waiting for somebody to fill that gap. You know,
Yes.
he's got everything he needs to complete his life except for the woman who will help him create this family.
Yes. So
And
it's
he
one more love story. It's one more story someone's telling themselves that is not grounded in reality.
exactly.
And
Exactly. So he was interesting. I couldn't get excited about him. I needed him to have a little more edge, a little more. I mean, eventually he does sort of confront her and like, what the hell are you doing with me? But it's more that her friends are saying, he's standing right there. Are you not paying attention? But to me, I wanted a little more excitement out of Tim personally. I don't know that Tim knew who he was competing against ever. You
yeah,
know,
I think you're right. I think he just hit a certain point in his career that when he decided the next one that will hang out, the next one that will stay is the one.
and she
And
sticks around.
for a
She
while
doesn't.
she does.
She sticks around for a bit. She's there. I mean, the story takes place over a 15-year span, roughly.
Mhm.
And, you know, and it jumps. We don't see every year in great detail, but we know that that her time with Tim, at least, it's not an insignificant amount of date in the world of dating.
Right.
Um, anything else we should talk about the book, or should we move on to things about writing?
Well, gosh, let's see. I guess one thing I just wanted to touch on, if I can, is writing about addiction.
Please.
This has just come up several times, and so I think that for me, it's proven tricky to write about addiction the way
How
that
so?
well, because on one hand, I think that writing about addiction warrants empathy and compassion. And
Hmm.
I think that people struggling with addiction are vulnerable. And so I really want to honor that. I want to write from a place of empathy.
Hmm.
Um, and so with Dutch in particular, I really tried not to flatten him into the addict, the bad
No,
boyfriend, the villain.
he's not.
Really did try
Definitely not.
yeah, I really did try to give him texture and to show how he got to where he got and just to show some nuance there. But at the same time, just because it warrants empathy and compassion, that doesn't mean that he's good for her. He's still a station wagon careening toward a cliff's edge, and she's still tied to the bumper.
Right.
And right. And so I I guess in a way, like Johnny Cash, I'm walking a line in writing addiction, where one side of the line is writing with compassion, and the other side of the line is writing with honesty. Where it's also really important to me to show that this is like a nasty, dark, unpleasant business too, and to do both justice. So
I
it's
think you do a great job in that.
oh, thank
Mm,
you.
I
Thank
really do. So we are compiling questions. So for our viewers out there, if you have a question for Megan A. Schikora, we would love to hear them. And we've got greetings from Grand Haven, Michigan, where I guess it's snowing. I
oh,
was up north recently and we had plenty of snow, much to my dismay. Um,
yeah.
so I want to switch a little bit. You talked about committing to writing in 2019, which was probably a good time since 2020 came along and many of us were stuck indoors doing something.
Yeah.
How did that decision come about? And is that something you would recommend to somebody who, like you, has always been writing on the side and trying to squeeze things in?
Well, that was a really important time because I have a daughter and she had turned 3. She was getting ready. This is pre-COVID, she was getting ready for preschool. I was well into my 40s at that point, and just with my age and with her starting school, even though it was only part-time, it was only a few hours a week, that felt to me like the right time to if you're ever going to really lean into this
Mm-hmm.
and stop doing it on the side, it has to be right now. Right now. I felt great urgency around that, and her starting school specifically. And so
It gave you a time slot.
it did. It did. And it felt just like a significant chapter. It felt like
Mm-hmm.
an important moment, like a now or never.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's funny because then with COVID, there were a lot of stops and starts. Uh, I didn't really get my legs about me with this book until kindergarten, first grade. But but to have the time, to make the time is so important, and it's so risky, and you give up money, and you give up some stability that you enjoyed previously, and it's very scary, and it doesn't work for so many people. It's just such a gamble,
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I just felt determined to try, and that it
Were,
had to be then.
so you were writing various essays and stories and have had some great success in terms of getting things published. When
Yeah.
you started in 2019, was your goal to write a book? And was this the book you embarked on, or is this something that emerged later?
Yes, it was this book, which started out as a short story, actually. I thought I could say everything I needed to say in 20 pages or less, and that
Mm-hmm.
turned out not to be true. And then as soon as I realized I might have a book here. I might have, a sustained project here. I had not had that before, and that is what created a lot of momentum for me. So,
Had you studied writing
yep.
in college or taken writing? I know you do some writing teaching, but did you have a background in that as well as in the mental health work that you did?
Yeah, I was an English major to my parents' chagrin, and
I
then I
wish
got a
I could have been.
yeah, yeah, it was great. We got to read a lot of great books,
Yeah.
and then I got a master's, in English
Oh,
also.
nice.
Yeah, yeah, and so that was my first sort of entry point into writing workshops and sitting in a group of people who've read a bit of your work and learning how to receive feedback, learning how to give feedback. It was huge. It was huge. And so I took that to then, write these stories and essays on the side while teaching writing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's so hard. It's so hard to do these types of projects
Yeah.
when there's so much other noise. And this is what most people do. Anyone with an artistic endeavor is pretty much trying to squeeze it in where they can, because
Right.
you have to eat, you have to eat, you have to live. So you're doing multiple things at once. And I did for a long time. I still do. But to be able to prioritize the writing of a book, deciding on the book, and committing to writing the book, and committing to seeing it through to see if I could make it go, I just really wanted to try. And I'm so glad that I did.
We are too. Let me ask, I know some other writers have talked about if you have a story in your head and you think it's a book, but you're not getting where you need to go. The idea of writing it as a short story first, or writing part of it as a short story first. Did you do that? I mean, you say you had the story. Did you know right away you could expand it? Or do you recommend that as a writing approach? Like, don't aim for your 200 or 350 page novel, aim for your 20-page story.
Sure. I would say that that's very helpful to start small. And then if it organically becomes bigger, then you already know kind of where you want to go and what that might look like. But if you
Mm-hmm.
sit down and determine to write a 300-page book, but you don't quite have a handle on the contents, I think you're setting yourself up for terrible stage fright and writer's block. And yeah, so starting small is good. Yeah.
um, what tips or advice would you have about turning a short story or a mentality that's sort of more driven toward short form writing into a longer piece? Like, what were the either concrete steps you did or just sort of the way you thought differently about writing this as a novel versus writing it in the formats you were more familiar with?
I think for me, because I always did the shorter essays and stories, I'm an impatient person, and that suits me very well. You
Right,
write something, it doesn't take that long, and you send it out, and it either is accepted or it's not. But
right.
it's a fairly quick process.
Mm-hmm.
It's so different from sitting with for a sustained period to write a book that you don't
Right.
know if you even have anything worthwhile. You're just kind of waiting around in the woods by yourself.
Mhm.
So that was just a gear that I had to change. I'm not going to get instant gratification. I'm not going to get feedback and snippets along the way or acceptances or rejections. I'm just going to sit with this big unknown for a long time. And so it's just a different way of thinking about it. And
Mhm.
I think for me, what was really helpful with this book was the editing process.
Mhm.
I I thought that I was done when I was nowhere near done.
Interesting.
I was nowhere near done. And I also think because of my impatience, I just wanted to be done already. And so this process made me slow down and be more disciplined. I had to learn to be much more disciplined, writing a certain amount of hours each day and really keeping the train on the track.
Right.
And then once I had a draft, something that resembled a draft, the editing process that I went through before I even sent it out
Wow.
was extensive. And I
Mhm.
am so glad that I did that. And I will only ever do that now, actually. I will only ever do that because I had looked at it so myopically for so long, I couldn't see it anymore.
Right.
So as soon as
Happened.
another pair of eyes came in, they were able to point out all kinds of things. And that was so frustrating because then I was not done. I just wanted to be done. But I'm convinced that this book saw the light of day because I did that editing process.
Great. All
So
right. So I'm hoping we have some questions in our queue that our producer can put up. We are talking to Megan A. Schikora, whose book, A Woman in Pink, came out this week from Regal House Publishing.
yeah,
How long did it take you to write this book, and what are some of your favorite books? So let's tackle one at a time.
sure. So I started it technically in 2019. So from start to finish, from then to now, it's 7 years. It's a long
Wow.
time, but a lot of stops and starts along the way with it.
When did you first query it? When did you first start sending out letters?
For 4 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I think about 4 years ago, and I signed with Regal House 2.5 years ago. So even after I had a contract, that's a long window between contract and the publication day. So it's long road for sure.
With further editing, I imagine, as you went.
A bit, but just because the queue is so full and the
Mm-hmm.
process is just a somewhat slow one for an independent publisher.
Sure.
And so all said and done, 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I hope the next one doesn't take so long.
Yeah, me too. It's
What are
done
some of,
actually.
what are some of your favorite books? What are you reading these days or recommending?
I've been reading Hannah Pittard. I like her a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I just finished Jamaica Kincaid, See Now Then. It's
Okay.
an older book.
Right.
I just read Nicholas Boggs's James Baldwin biography, which was beautiful. And it reads like a novel.
That's
It's
great.
beautiful, beautiful book. And then next for me is Strangers by Belle Burden.
I've heard wonderful things about that.
Yeah, I'm
It,
excited.
it is it is all over.
Yeah.
Are you working on another novel? Our audience wants to know.
Well, I've actually finished a second novel since, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's called Breaking the Surface, and it's unrelated to this first book. It's a family novel, and
What do you mean by that?
it's
Like
about it's about a
multi-generational?
family, multi-generational family trauma, and certain cycles and patterns that potentially can be broken, in the family that have really caused some damage. So
Mm-hmm.
it's called Breaking the Surface. That's out for review right now.
Excellent.
And the book that I'm working on right now is a third one.
Wow.
It's a detour from the novels back to personal essays. It's a collection of essays called Liberty Street.
Great.
And I'm excited. I'm in 3 silos.
That's excellent. We
Thanks.
talked a little bit already about how you celebrated your pub day. Are you also doing any touring, any speaking events?
Yes, I'll be at Literati Bookstore in Ann Arbor tomorrow night for my
Oh,
launch event. So
nice.
yeah, thank you. That's very exciting. It's the first one. And then I have a number of events. I'm in Michigan, so they'll be in Detroit, Plymouth, Ferndale, Royal Oak. I'm going to pop over to Chicago in April and do one as well. Mostly local, though, mostly local.
For
So
now.
for now, yes,
I've
yes,
spoken to many authors early on when their book's out and they think they're going, to the next city over and that's it. And all
yeah,
of a sudden something clicks and they find themselves all over the world. So we
that's
wish that luck for you as well. And of
right.
course, when you're in Ann Arbor, you need to stop by Zingerman's and get yourself a great deli sandwich.
Oh, I love Zingerman so much.
Yes.
Yes,
And
yes.
was there 2 years ago and I was stunned by how it's no longer just a place to get your sandwiches. It's a whole
No,
destination.
and there's multiple buildings, and it's a
Yes,
whole, yeah, it's an institution in
it,
Ann
it
Arbor.
is. I've been fortunate to go there many times. So
Yeah,
I'm very excited to hear that there will be more coming from you, Megan.
thank you.
We hope all lands well. We encourage people to go out to their favorite indie bookstore or go to bookshop.org, which is where we like to have people order their books. You will find A Woman in Pink on the Mighty Blaze bookshelf there, as well as all the other books, not only by Blaze hosts, but by all of the books that are Blaze guests books, both current and past. It's a great organization, and they have done wonders to help indie bookstores and organizations like the Blaze, because they give us a little bit of kickback. And every little bit helps when you're a volunteer organization like we are. We look forward to hearing more about Megan. You can find her, I think, mostly on Instagram, among other places. And I'm sure people will be diving in to find some of your past writing. You can find that on Megan's website as well. There are links to lots of good essays. I hope to dive in myself later today. And coming up next on Debut Spotlight, a month from today, I will be interviewing Nancy Foley, whose book, I Am Agatha, is about a reclusive painter who falls in love with an older widow. And the two women must deal with this widow's worsening dementia, as well as the widow's son, who has his own perspective on this relationship. And it's a very funny and moving book about love, memory, and art. And it's inspired in part by the life of the painter Agnes Martin, who, interesting enough, has had several books that have come out of her life that are inspired by. So I highly recommend to our viewers that you show up on March 19th, 2 p.m. Eastern, to hear that discussion. Till then, go out to your stores, buy this book, read it, and let us know how you like it. It's A Woman in Pink by Megan A. Schikora. Thank you so much. Keep reading.